Hello.
Can you hear me? Hey,
Yeah,
good, good, good. All right, so we'll just give it another minute or two, and then
sure.
we can get started. So, what were your revision cases?
I had a subtalar fusion
Yeah.
that failed. That was my own that I had to
Okay.
revise. Then I
Oh, bummer.
had a lady who came in with a total toe implant that
Mm,
failed. Someone took it out,
right,
hyperextended, crossing
right.
over, some weird toe surgery that needed to be redone. And then my last one was a disaster midfoot fusion. I don't know what they tried to do, honestly. Like the navicular was on the top of her foot. Like it was just a mess.
You're sort of Charcot, but you're not.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah,
yeah. I'm like, whose
that
idea was
is.
it to put all three cases the day before a
Yeah.
holiday weekend?
But that's like the struggle before you like
No.
rush off into the wilderness or the
Oh,
abyss of
God, I
vacation,
know.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we'll go ahead and kick stuff off here.
Yeah.
So first off, everyone, I want to thank you for joining us tonight for another edition of Behind the Scenes Conversations with the Program Director. I am beyond honored, humbled, and privileged to have one of my dear friends and colleagues and former semi co-fellows,
Yeah.
Dr. Lauren Geaney, join us coming in from University of Connecticut. So Dr. Geaney actually did her undergraduate at Villanova before going to University of Connecticut for med school, and then continued on with her residency training there before going off to Mercy Hospital in Baltimore, where she did a foot and ankle fellowship under the guidance of Mark Meyerson, Rebecca Serrato, Cliff Jang, and John Campbell, which is actually where she and I initially met.
Yeah.
While I was a research fellow, Dr. Geaney was a clinical fellow. And so we've known each other for quite some time now. So it is honestly a huge honor and privilege for me to have you on tonight. So thank you for taking time out of your weekend, holiday weekend, to join
Yeah.
us. Really
No, thanks
appreciate
for
it.
inviting me.
Of
It's
course, of
great
course.
what you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I know all the students super appreciate you being here tonight.
Yeah.
So, no, thank you for that again. So I want to kick off with sort of a standard question I've been asking, most of the program directors I've been on here, and also just to give us, give people some perspective on your experience in this role. So how long have you been program director, and what sort of
Yeah.
lessons have you learned
Yeah.
from that perspective specifically?
So I actually came on as the associate program director. The program director that was here, actually Tessa Ballot, who's now at Chicago. She was the program director when I first started in practice in 2014. She left a couple years later, so I kind of first came in as the associate program director for a couple years. So I'm starting my third year as a full-time program director. Um, I mean, as far as things I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
I learned it was a lot bigger job than I knew when I started, but mostly good.
Yeah.
It's interesting just as far as, my personal story. I've always been interested in education. I actually went to college to be a high school math teacher, and then, of course, that changed, but that's always been a passion of mine. So it's one of those things that, I always thought kind of saw myself in this role.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it came early, so I got a chance. I've learned a lot. I would say the thing that I've gotten probably a lot better at that I've really had to learn is mostly about giving feedback and having honest conversations because that's, always been kind of a challenge. You never want to tell people,
Yeah.
that they're, everyone comes in, everyone's great, obviously. I mean, your average ortho resident is still way above average, and
Right.
compared to most other people. And so you never want to give bad feedback, but at the same time, how people can get better. And so I've learned that everyone, wants it. I mean, this, I don't want to say it's a generational thing, but people really desire feedback, and it's a really good conversation to have. And it's not as hard once you learn how to do it and you learn that people want to hear it. So, I've learned a lot about that. Communication, major, we try, and we'll talk about this later, but one of the things that we really try to do at UConn is respond in time to when there are problems. And so that's something that we really strive for, being honest. I don't want you to lie about your duties. If there's a problem, tell me, because I can't change
Mm.
unless I know. So
Yeah.
that's something else that, is really, I've gotten a lot better at, really looking for feedback myself, giving
Right.
feedback, in a helpful way.
Right.
And then at the same time, making changes based on that.
It's an interesting. Well, first, I really appreciate what you said.
Yeah.
I think that notion of feedback is so critical, and especially as we go more and more virtual with a lot of interactions, that sense of feedback is probably even more critical. How do you think this? How do you think the sense of feedback that you have gotten yourself or that you are giving has sort of changed from the time you were from
Yeah.
being a med student to
Yeah.
now then a resident and then an attending and of course now the program director?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, the way I approach it, 'cause again, for me, I always, I like to assume everyone is as good as it gets because that's who we match, that's who we train. So rather than saying you stink, this is what you
Okay.
need to do, I'm assuming that everyone is the best that comes in to see me, and it's kind of up to them to prove me wrong, And so I always try to, so if somebody has a bad day, it's not. I try not to get down on them, what's going on, because sometimes they were just on call and they had a nasty night, or there's something personal going on with them. So I try to make it, let's go get coffee and sit down rather than, you stink, you shouldn't have done it this way. So I
Right.
think, it's a conversation, and that's what I've learned, even with, everything going on, all the crazy stuff in the world with, the pandemic and with all that we're seeing with, social inequity. I mean, all those things, it's an open dialogue, and you just have to sit down and talk about it and have, mature conversation, whereas it's both ways. And I think just if you establish that relationship early, it's very easy, and so we really try hard to sit down early on twice a year with all of our residents, as a group, and say, okay, what needs to be changed, and making it an easy dialogue. But, as far as taking feedback and giving it, I think that it was hard for me to take it for a long time. I think we're always hard on ourselves,
Yeah.
but it's hard to hear it.
Right.
And you have to kind of have the mentality that, the only way you get better is to know what you're not doing the right way and to be able to take it. It's hard sometimes. We had residents give us anonymous feedback. And
Right.
that was hurtful, some of the things, because you think you're doing a great
Right.
job, and a
Right.
lot of
Right.
residents don't feel comfortable telling you. And so, but
Right.
it taught me things that I need to do better.
Right. And I think that's I mean, I think it's great that you are encouraging that and nurturing that notion because I think that's we as surgeons, just like we were talking about your revision cases, we're always trying to do better for our patients, do better for our residents and our students. And so I think the fact that that's so important and is kind of at the forefront of how y'all handle things, I think is really critical. With that in mind, how are you viewing the kind of prospective residency
Mm-hmm.
applications? In the sense of like, hey, what kinds of things are you and the team at
Yeah.
UConn going to be looking at that may be a little more tantamount to this notion of feedback and those who may be a little bit more open to it,
Yeah.
right? And being, vocal and being, honest and that sense
Yeah.
of communication. What kinds of things are you going to be focusing on this cycle specifically?
Well, I mean, I think, the challenge we always have is to know who really, is interested in us and who wants to be at UConn. And so I think, again, I mean, the communication, it's, even though everyone feels, I think, like they don't want to bother people, it's nice to hear, to say, hey, I've been looking at your program, and, I really like this and this about it. So it shows interest. And I think, we want people that want to be here, and so I think that we'll all say that. We don't want to be 60th on someone's list and the match here because they don't want to be here,
Right.
and you can feel that, who really values, and everyone has their, I mean, everyone has the right program for them. And so it's not nothing personal, certainly. I mean,
Right.
especially location, family, all those things come into play. But, I think number one is, someone that shows interest and just reaches out to us and has a dialogue with us. And, I've had people, email me, hey, can we talk on the phone? Of course. I mean, I think, where you feel comfortable. And I think it's, of course, really hard for the students this year, um, because you don't get that same dialogue as you would if you were on away rotation. So, I'd encourage you to reach out, if you want to talk to me or one of our residents, just to get a sense of what we're about. I think, that's a great thing. And obviously you're here. So, you guys are trying to do all those things, to get a sense of the programs.
Are you guys holding between you and Dr. Mazaka and company, are you guys holding any virtual offerings or any
Yeah.
other way, any other sort of conferences that the students listening here or in general can kind of
Yeah.
engage with y'all in?
So yeah, so we started, we did our first kind of, we had WebEx before we had Zoom, which is, it
Yeah,
doesn't work
right.
as well, but now we have Zoom. But we we
Good.
started that, pretty early on in the pandemic, as soon as we heard that there were going to be no away rotations. And we only had so many students, so pretty much we reached out to the students that had applied to do away rotations. And then, anyone whose name we got heard of somewhere else. And so whatever students we had contact information for, we kind of sent that out. And so, we doing them monthly. Last month we took a break from it only because, I just talking to my own students, it sounds like they were having 2, 3, 4 offerings a week, and it was just getting really
Right,
overwhelming. So we
right.
just took a break for a month. I expect we're going to probably do one at the end of this month again. Just to have breakout sessions with the residents, kind of getting to know you, or trying to highlight all of it, because you have 4 different hospitals. So we've had, the site director from each hospital kind of come and give a little intro to their place. So certainly anyone here, can reach out, and if you can shoot me your email address, I'd be here. I'll give you guys my email address at the end of this. And then you guys can certainly shoot me an email if you want us to include you on that listserv. We've been trying to kind of put it out on social media now that we're getting a little more savvy at that. We decided not to do the virtual rotation, and again, this is a hard balance because you guys also have other things that you're doing. You have ICU rotations and ED rotations, and the last thing you want to do is put more pressure on you. So it's a hard balance because we want to give you the opportunity to show your interest, but at the same time, we don't want to overburden you with feeling like you have to be at all these things. If you don't show up, then we don't think you want to be, so it's been a balance. And so we chose not to do the curriculum offerings for that reason.
So that actually raises a really good point, and it's something that I was talking with another faculty member about recently. To How much do you think the virtual offerings, at least in your opinion, because they're obviously they take time and effort and energy,
Yeah.
and so they're obviously great, but how much how much can students expect, or do you think, based on what you've heard from other PDs,
Yeah.
to really engage with the program through said virtual like rotations, if you
Yeah.
will? And can you expect to get a letter out of that? Because that's something I get asked about all the time as well.
I mean, I think as somebody reading the letter, it's not as helpful for me because, the things that are important for me and for our program is, how do you, work as a team? For us, the things that, and we've kind of sat down and said, okay, what is it that makes someone successful in our program? And it's really about,
Right,
being part of the team and being, work ethic and those sorts of things. So I think
right,
that's hard to show on, and I think that the benefit of the virtual offerings is for education more than your ability to and again, that was another thing, you guys are going to learn what you need to learn to be an orthopedic surgeon. That's my job.
right.
If you're not going to have the ability to really showcase what makes you a good resident, then to me that's just more work for you, and so I think that's, in the end, why we chose not to do it, because I just didn't think that it would be worthwhile, and I know that there's just so much going on and so much pressure already on you guys.
Yeah, and that was something that came up here down at
Yeah.
at UM, and again, and also like just doing all these Zooms and whatever else.
Yeah.
I know that people are getting zoomed out, in some way.
Right. No, and
There's
that's kind
almost
of
like
what we hear.
I'm sure there's going to be a burnout paper of some
Yeah.
sort with regards to Zoom, right? And
Yeah.
all the webinars and everything like that. So it's totally understandable, and it's interesting because the another question that comes up in this way is, should I focus on my home program,
Right.
um, or should I focus on this virtual
Yeah.
offering that's there? And what would your advice be in
I
in
mean,
that sense?
so I mean, I think the benefit of the home program, or of the virtual program, I think it's good for that group. If you do a virtual
Yeah,
program at another place, it's almost like an away rotation. Doing away rotation
right,
somewhere else doesn't necessarily help you at UConn,
right,
other than your letter.
right,
So, I'd say if you do really well and you get honors on your home rotation, then that's something everyone's going to see. Whereas if you do a virtual offering, if it's not, if you can't get honors at it, if it's just kind of a pass fail, then if it's a place that you're super, super interested in, then I think that that's worthwhile. But
Right.
I don't think it's going to help you get in necessarily to another program, kind of in
Got it.
my opinion. I don't know that that's true, but just as someone reading the application,
Sure.
if you get honors in all of your fourth year clinical rotations and you did, a virtual offering at another place, and maybe if you can get a great letter of recommendation, that'd be worthwhile. But if it
Mm,
just shows that you did it, I don't know if that helps your application so much.
understood. Do you guys have at UConn, do you guys implement screens of any sort? And if you use screens,
Yeah.
what do you screen by? And
Yeah.
what sort of cutoffs, if you use them,
Sure.
are there?
So the way we've done it historically, and it kind of started before I got there, and I modified it a little bit, mostly because I screened myself out. So we get 7,800 applications, and really the number of applications that we can reasonably review and the amount of time that we have with our faculty is about 450. So I kind of put in filters, and every year they change until I get down to that number. Then what I do is I review all the people we screened out. So, I give the, 450, I divide them up between the faculty, and then we have like a rubric for how they score them. Then I also review those as well. But then I go through all the people that kind of got screened out. So last year, I think it was 235 is where we screened that at.
Got it.
And we screen in DOs. We do have a DO resident, so that doesn't get screened out. We do, on first glance, screen out foreign medical grads. But again, I review that. We have a current, foreign medical grad at UConn as well. So just because they get screened out initially, we don't lose sight of them, especially if someone we know kind of contacts us and says, hey, definitely a person worth looking at.
Right.
But I give myself 2 to 3 kind of picks of my own out of that pile to interview.
That's absolutely wonderful. And how many are you interviewing per spot? There's how many spots and how many are you interviewing per spot
So
or offering
we
interviews for?
so we normally we have 5 spots. We normally interview 66. That's just the way kind of our grid works. This year we're actually thinking of interviewing fewer but giving more time since we don't know anyone. So whereas normally half of the people we interview are rotators and we know them, what we're
Okay.
doing is we're cutting down a little bit but giving ourselves more time with them and allowing everybody to interview them,
Got
just
it.
so that they get contact with everyone. We have, I think that it's more accurate the more people you have see the same people, because, someone may have a bad interview or just some may just
Right.
not click and personality wise, and that's not fair to say they're not going to be a good resident. So the more people that see them consistently, I think the more valid our, results will be.
Especially with a little bit of extra time as well,
Yeah, exactly.
across like all the faculty that are involved. The are what platform are you all using this year? I know there's a couple floating around.
Yeah.
Do you know which one you guys are using for
So
the
we're going to be
interviewing?
using Zoom just so we can have the
Zoom.
breakout groups, because
Okay.
we're going to kind of do it in sessions, and that way we can kind of put people in different rooms. So, our UConn ended up buying one for all the GME so that we can have access to it. So we'll be able.
Got
So we are going to use Zoom.
got
I
it.
think we may do like the virtual tour and like the get life in the day in the life of the resident stuff. Those things that normally would be
Yeah.
in person, I think we're gonna try to get those done ahead of time so people can review that on their own time, so that
Right.
it's less time for the actual interview, so they have more time to go to other places and interview.
Got it. So two kind of sets of folks that come up are one, those who don't have home programs,
Mm-hmm.
which someone just brought
Yeah,
up
I saw
about
that.
here a second ago. And then obviously the reapplicants,
Yeah.
folks who are taking a year off, prelim year,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So tell me about how you look at the folks and who don't have home programs initially, and what kinds of things may stick out or things that you might suggest that they do to bolster their chances.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the challenge, obviously, because, you have fewer contacts. So I think, somebody without a home program, I don't know that we necessarily think differently of them. In fact, we just, one of our interns matched from a program, he's from South Dakota, and they don't have a residency program. He's actually the only one we matched that wasn't a rotator, and so far so good.
Good.
Everyone seems to like him.
Yeah. Yeah. Fingers
So,
crossed.
so I mean, I
Sure,
don't
he's
think
great.
that matters. I mean, I think in fact, it shows initiative. If you're able to and this is the challenge, right? If you go to a place that's a workhorse and just feeds
Mhm.
you papers versus a place where you have to do the work and you have to find and you have to do the IRB. And, so I don't look at numbers per se as much as I look at how you got there. That's always what I say too, even about a research year. It's less impressive to me if you had a research year at a place that puts out a million papers and, hey, I did 2 or 3 primary authorships in the 4 years of medical school while getting honors and doing well in the steps, right? That means that you can multitask, you're great at time
Right,
management. Those are all great skills to be a resident. And so if you're at a home program and you don't have an orthopedic department, but hey, I took the time, I took the effort to make the contacts and I got this one paper and it was really hard to do and I did it all on my own, that's meaningful. So I don't think, I think you have to work to get, you know, I think the letters of recommendation from an orthopedic surgeon is important because, I'd argue that we know better what it takes to do the job, but
right.
the research opportunities, those things don't matter as much to me as the fact that have the initiative and you can time manage.
That's something I share with students all the time. So it's really good to hear about that. About and I know something I share. Just for people to know, it's not like I was perfect at that by any stretch of imagination. And I think it's something that does really take a lot of time because when you're in residency, as Dr. Geaney would attest to, you're juggling a lot of different things. So finding that harmony as early as you can shows a lot of maturity and your ability to kind of progress well through your training and succeed just in general. What do you think about, how does UConn view reapplicants, whether they, did the year off for
Yeah.
research purposes or as a prelim specifically? And do you have a preference one way or the other?
So so you need somebody that didn't match and are
Yeah, correct.
reapplying. So
Hmm.
I think most of the time it's somebody that we know for some reason. So we've had our own rotators who didn't match, and so we certainly look at them again because we know them well. Or again, I think for these less traditional people, it takes a phone call from somebody, and then certainly we take a look again. We've had some non-traditional people, but they all came. It's just, again, it's hard to sift through so many of them to
Right,
know who are the diamonds in the rough. So you
right,
get a phone call from somebody saying, hey, take a look. That's what
right.
it takes to kind of get them to the top of the pile.
That's awesome. And that actually brings up a great point. There was a question earlier. We've talked a lot on the webinars before that you and I were on a few weeks back now. We talked about advocacy and having people reach out, just like you're alluding to right now. When should people be reaching out? So
Yeah.
if you have an advocate,
Yeah.
we're heading towards, ERAS submissions.
Sure.
Should it be before ERAS is submitted? Should it be right after I submit ERAS? Should it be
Yeah.
later on? What would you suggest is
I
ideal
would
that,
honestly, because if I get an email now, that goes way down my pile and I don't remember. If I get an email after I've already sent interviews, it's too late. So it's kind of, there's a sweet spot. I think, I believe it's November 1st that we're going to be allowed to review them. I have to double check. I think, or maybe October 15th. I don't remember what
October
it's
21st, if I remember right.
October
I think it's
21st.
October 20th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would say between October 21st and it sounds like we're working on trying to find a date that we're all going to send interview invites out. If that's
Mm-hmm.
true, we need to, I'd say as close to October 21st as possible because we're going to start looking through them quickly. We're going to try to finalize our list as quickly as we can before that deadline where we're going to send those invites out. So I would say just after or close to October 21st would be the best to keep it in your forefront.
Yeah, and that's a question I've been asked a bunch too, and I've sort of suggested exactly what you have just
Yeah.
recommended, which is, if you're not every program is sort of ready, primed to get the like I'm interested,
Yeah.
or so and so is interested, but if it's closer to that deadline
Yeah.
and right afterwards, then I think that's kind of that
Yeah.
perfect window of opportunity, if you will.
Yeah.
Someone asked about graduate degrees
Yeah.
beyond that of like a research year.
Yeah.
Do you think that makes a difference or it helps applications?
I think life experience helps, and again, yes, residency is to teach you guys, but it's also a job. So knowing that you've kind of had a job, you've worked with a group of people, I think all that's helpful. So if you have a degree or anything that you've done beforehand that just, shows that, you know, you kind of have lived life before, you know what you're getting into, you know, I think is helpful. I wouldn't say specifically, you know, MBAs are always, you know, really great because we've learned a lot, honestly, from our residents who
Right.
have MBAs. But I wouldn't say if I have two candidates that are both great that that would necessarily be a huge factor in it. I think it's certainly a talking point. I think it's a great thing to talk about in your interview. And I think that if it's something like you have really great research ideas regarding that and how to implement it, I think that that's really, you know, just a unique perspective.
Is that something to talk about perhaps in like the personal statement, or
Yeah,
do you think, are there other things to talk about in the personal statement in particular that
yeah,
you would
that's a
recommend?
good question. So the personal statement, what's important to me in the personal statement is, again, what's going to make you a good resident, how you decided you were interested in ortho. I know ortho is great. I do it, you know, so I don't need to know, you know,
It's
the
awesome.
injury you had unless that kind of leads to something that says, you know, hey, I was an athlete. I was the leader of a team. I know how to work in a team. So, you know, use your personal statement to either highlight something that I may not pick up on. I mean, again, think about how many we're reviewing. I'm just kind of skimming through, you know, and sometimes you don't know if it's somebody that spent 1 hour doing, you know, a clinic at their school or if they were the president of that clinic and they created the clinic, you know. So
Yeah.
when I'm looking through the application, I just kind of see these names. I don't necessarily know what they mean. Use your personal statement to highlight something I may look over or that you really think is important, um, or use it to tell me why you're going to be a good resident. Give me examples of stuff you've done that prove that you have what it takes and that, you know, you're committed to it and that this is why you think, you know, you're going to do well doing it.
Do you think that it's, if people are particularly interested in UConn, it's important for them to include sort of a program,
Yeah.
a UConn specific
Yes.
statement? And what kinds of things would you want to see in that
Well, I
specifically?
mean, just, you know, honesty, you know, I mean, you can tell if it's
Yeah.
cut and paste. So if it's, you know, so if it's something that's unique to us, I mean, and even before this year, you know, every once in a while you'll see that sprinkled in there and it catches your eye, you know,
Right.
by 700th, you're just kind of breezing through it. If you can get to the end, you're like, that was a good personal statement. You're just kind of skimming it. But then you see UConn, you're like, ooh, who is this person? You know, so it really catches your eye. It brings you in, you know, you're not going to do it for all, you know, 50, 60 places you're applying to. But if you take the time and you highlight a reason why you want, some people have said, hey, I talked to this other resident and I, you know, so they have some sort of contact or something, a contact to the area that I wouldn't, again, pick up on, then that's helpful because you may say, well, my application shows that I grew up in, you know, I was born in Chicago, but hey, I lived in Connecticut for 10 years and my grandmother lives there. And then I did all of my education somewhere else. I wouldn't know that you have a connection to the area. So it's nice for you to kind of tie in, you know, something personal too.
Right. You know, I think that's a perfect point. I think it's another way to just demonstrate your interest to say, hey, really be thoughtful about why you're interested in that particular
Right.
program. You know, someone's asking, and before I pivot to the UConn stuff that I wanted to get into, someone's asking about how you realistically know, you know, how, like what your commitment is without in a way,
Yeah,
and
that's
you
hard.
know, how would you kind of demonstrate that engagement, or how would you get to find out a little bit more about the program
About the
without
program.
doing that? Hmm.
Yeah, no, that's really hard. And I think that that's the challenge of this year. You know, I think that you get a sense, and I think it's harder with virtual interviews because there's something about being at a place and being with the residents that you get a feel that I
Right.
don't know that it's going to be harder to get. But I think, you know, we all have residents who are happy to talk to students. So if you have, you know, again, you're probably not going to contact 60 places, but if you have places you think maybe near the top of your list, just kind of reaching out to the program coordinator or the program director and saying, you know, hey, I'd like to learn more. Is there a resident I can talk to? You know, I think that that's a good way to kind of get a little bit more information about it. You know, I think we're all trying to boost up our websites a little bit because we know that this is, you know, going to be a lot of the ways you guys get information. So, you know, I think just going to the websites and seeing what's there is important too.
Yeah, you know, and just to kind of like piggyback off of that is the, you know, social media, obviously, like what we're doing here has been like a great way for a lot of programs to kind of showcase, including UConn, to showcase the residents and some of the features and some of the faculty and whatever else. So certainly engaging with some of the residents, even via social media, could be a way to at least sort of get a keen sense as to, hey, what the program is like. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be exactly like what an away is. But one thing I would just share is, even when you go to an away, you're on whatever service. That's a very small reflection of the entire program. Like if you come to Miami, you go to one hospital, it's way different than another hospital on the other side of town. So you have to just keep in mind that, hey, the more sort of feedback you can get, just the better a decision you can make. So a very important question I want to ask is, what are the top 3 highlights? What are the top 3 highlights as strengths of UConn? Because that's what I want to know in particular.
So, I mean, I think the first thing that we commented on, which is just that, we make changes quickly. We're not a program that says this is the way we've done it always. I mean, this year is different than last year, and it's different than last year. Just yesterday, we had our PGY2 we have some new faculty. So he finished and I called him. I said, what can we do better? And he suggested some changes. So we're making meetings to figure out how to change that. So, the question that people always like to ask, what are you going to change in 5 years? Well, if we need to change it, we're changing it now, So
Right.
we meet, we have meetings, we have breakfast with our chiefs once a month. We meet with our residents twice a year, each resident kind of individually twice a year. We talk about it at our journal club. So we're always getting feedback. We're always trying to see how we can do better. And if there's a problem, even to give another example, we're talking with our chiefs at Hartford Hospital, which is our big trauma center, and they were just getting killed. And our, trauma chief was doing everything. So we said, what can we do to make it easier? And so we're splitting up all the grand rounds now so that they're not doing it all. So, we try to listen, make changes, as they happen. But I think that goes to our other strength, which is just the relationship that we all have. I think that we really do try to, make it an easy way to, for us all to get together. We actually created this year mentor groups, which has been really, I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but so what we have is we have 5 different teams, and it's just attendings who have volunteered to do it. And in fact, almost every attending volunteered to do it. But on each team, we have a PGY 1 through a PGY 5. So we have 5 different groups. And, whenever there's a problem, we sit down and, everyone gets together. We go to someone's house, we go to a brewery, we go wherever, and everyone just sits down and talks. So when everything, happened, with all the social injustice and, all the teams just got together and sat down and said, what is everyone feeling? What is everyone going through? We gave some articles to read, and it's, the residents always impressed me because I didn't know if it was going to be just really awkward. That's why I went to a brewery, so we could just drink if it was awkward.
Right.
But really, really good conversations. And I think that it just, we're all taking our time to do it. We have, in general, a young faculty, which, a lot of them are graduates of UConn too. And just really dedicated to it. Most of us go by our first name with our residents, and they call us, I'm not on call, but I'm getting calls about fractures in the foot and ankle on weekends from the other hospitals, which we do. So, I think that that's, probably the number 2 thing. And then the last thing I think is just, our innovation. We have our Bioskills lab, which is, we have 6 arthroscopy stations. The residents can call at any time and just ask, our lab tech to just thaw out a specimen, and they can go in and practice. Awesome. We got the virtual reality system that we have available to them whenever they want to use it, and we're starting to integrate that into. So, we're trying to be, on the front edge of all that stuff.
Do you, with regards to the skills lab, do you have it sort of in a curricular fashion
we
right
do.
now?
So, I mean, of course, right now it's on hold a little bit just because of our restrictions. Although we did kind of do a kind of different version of it, which actually went over really well and we may continue to do. But so we incorporate that into our core curriculum. So depending on what the topic is, if we're doing trauma, we'll have bioskills with certain approaches and plates, and the reps come in and bring their implants. When I do mine, we get a total ankle lab, we get calc fracture, talus fracture lab, and we get all the implants in. So we do incorporate that. Usually about twice a month, because we have, probably every other, we have a Bioskills lab, and we try to use it however we can.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
How how beneficial would you say in terms of what you've seen from the time you were a resident to now,
Yeah.
has that Bioskills lab, or even from when you were a med student, has that Bioskills lab made in terms of just the ability for the residents to progress,
Yeah.
surgically speaking?
Well, no, I think that it's really nice because they get to practice what they see, and even, with COVID especially, they got to go in and we had the virtual reality set up. We had sessions that people could sign up for, and me as a faculty member, as a junior faculty, when I first started, it was great. So I got to go in and something I hadn't seen before. I wasn't sure. I just would practice, and sometimes the residents will say, hey, can we go in and take a look at this? We'll just go in if they're on my service and just kind of go through some of the anatomy. So I think that, unfortunately, I don't think it's taken advantage of enough just because life gets busy.
Right.
But it's, nice, for them to practice their skills. And I think, again, especially, when the surgical volume was low, it was really nice to have.
What is the rotation schedule like, and what hospitals are they
Yeah.
typically going to?
So we have 4 different hospitals. UConn's more of our academic hospital, not as busy trauma-wise. And at UConn, it's more service-based. So, the twos have a recon. They're half arthroplasty, half spine. That's the one we may be switching just to full arthroplasty. And we have a PGY2 on hand there. We have a foot and ankle 3 and a foot and ankle 4. We have a spine, resident on the 4. We have a chief on arthroplasty. We have a 3, a 5 on sports. So they're all very, and we have a 4 on tumor there. So they're very service dependent. Then we go to Hartford, which is primarily a trauma hospital. So they're doing, high level, busy trauma there. St. Francis is also now level 1, but they do a little of everything. The 3 does some sports, the 4 does some trauma, some hand, and then the 2 is doing a little bit of arthroplasty and some trauma too. So there's a little bit of a mismatch there. And then at Children's, they're there as a 2, a 3, and a 4.
Okay, wow. So now, is that sort of all over? Like, how spread out
Yeah,
are the
no, it's close.
hospitals?
So Hartford Hospital and the Children's Hospital are on the same campus. St. Francis is like 5 miles away. I mean, so most people live in West Hartford, and everything from there is within about 10 to 15 minutes away. So everything's pretty close.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What would what's sort of the chemistry amongst the residents like in terms of just how they interact, and then what's that sort of interaction like with the faculty and the residents specifically as well?
I mean, I would say, they get along great. I think probably most programs would say the same. I mean, you kind of find people that, fit with your personalities. And, I think all of orthopedics has a certain personality.
Right. As we know.
But, they all get along well. I mean, they're each other's brothers and sisters, their family. I mean, they are who they rely on, and even just today, I was rounding, later this evening with the resident on my service who's going off on a long, vacation. He's supposed to get married, not because of everything, but still going away. Right. And, I want him to call, a consult on something. I'm like, why don't you just let the resident do it? He goes, no, this is my patient. I'm doing it before I go. And I think that they just have each other's back. They don't dump on each other. They work together, and nobody leaves till the job's done.
So really that team approach more than anything else. That's all. What is the, you say you have a young faculty. Yeah. So is it a similar sort of, and some of our obviously alumni of the program, is it that similar kind of camaraderie, that sort of?
No, it's nice because, again, I do probably 95% foot and ankle. So, I take all the ankle fractures, even though I'm not on call, even just, I was telling you, I have my first total ankle infection, and I'm calling my arthroplasty partner, and I'm just like going through everything, getting advice from her. And, I have a sports partner, we do cases together, so I think that it's a great group. And, we also have senior guys that, Bob Arciera will do cases with you if you ask, and he'll send me some of the athletes, and because he has ownership of them, we kind of do it together. But it's really a great, I think that's, our fourth strength, and that's one of the big reasons I came back, is that we have a great faculty and everyone looks out for each other.
That's absolutely incredible to hear. Tell me, you were sort of talking about it earlier with regards to, hey, you guys like to make changes right away. So in that sort of vein, what sort of things are you all looking to improve upon, or sort of actively improving upon for the program?
So, I mean, I think, trying to get an earlier arthroplasty experience was a big thing. We kind of had a little bit sprinkled in it here and there, but not like a really set experience. And so that's what we've been trying to. We got recently got a new partner, Olga Soloviova. She came from NYU. She started last year. So now that she's more busy, we're incorporating, her into the PGY2 curriculum. We actually just got a spine fellow. And so we're kind of working on how to, and that's, we have fellows in sports, but our big thing is that we're a residency. We're not a fellowship, and so it is very clear that the fellow's job is to get out of the way of the residents and let the residents be educated. And so, fortunately, the spine fellow who just started has been great about, working with the team and not taking cases. So that's something we're trying to kind of work more on curriculum, I guess, in some of these, because we used to only have one person on spine. Now we have two. So we're creating like a spine curriculum to work on journal clubs and pre-op and post-op conferences. And the same thing with arthroplasty, kind of creating a little more educational content in that sense.
Oh, well, that's absolutely awesome to hear. There's a couple of questions that just came through that I don't want to miss. So someone had asked about being an osteopathic student with a pretty heavy athletic training background, but has strong COMLEX scores without USMLE scores. Would they be considered in that screen, or would they have to have the USMLE scores to be considered evaluated?
Yeah, just the way we've always done it. Like, I just don't know what COMLEX, that's my own ignorance, I guess, is that I don't know what that equates to as far as USMLE scores. So, now that we have the DO, match with ours and we're going to be getting more, that's something that I'm just going to have to figure out, like what correlates to what as far as an average score goes. But, I don't think that would make a difference as long as, the challenge is that you go on the ERAS and then you just put in your filters. And what would happen is that somebody that didn't have a USMLE score could get filtered out just because it didn't have a value to it. So, honestly, I never thought of that question, and I may have filtered people out without realizing it, because pretty much I look at over 235 and under 235. If it's not listed, I may have been filtering it out without even realizing it. So, I think just to make sure that you're not filtered out, it may be good to have a USMLE score, but, I think that's something, as we're getting better at, being more open and diverse, that we'll just have to learn.
With regards to that step one cutoff in particular, someone asked, if they have sort of lower than a 235, can the phone calls on their behalf sort of help overcome that?
Yeah, and so I'll tell you, so what I look for, so, when I'm going through the pile of the people that didn't make that kind of random cutoff that we pick, then what I'm looking at, number one, did they go up on step twos, to show that I learned from my mistakes, whatever happened, and everyone's allowed to have a bad day, but hey, I figured out what my weaknesses are and I got better, right? That's important. Did they get honors and things? What were the letters of recommendation? So I kind of look at, first, again, I want to make sure they got better and not worse. And as long as they're going up and everything else is otherwise great, and then if you get a call, then that would definitely be, something to put, somebody up on the list.
Okay, so that's great to hear, and something I've also encouraged too. Someone else had asked, you're towards the end of the academic year and you are deciding whether to renew, the contracts of the intern going to second year and so on, right? Yeah. How are there certain things that you're looking for, or in terms of keeping residents in the program, in terms of just base sort of like parameters and so on, and just as a general rule?
You have to so once you're ours, and you're part of our family, and if you struggle, it's my job to get you where you need to be. It's been rare and extenuating circumstances when somebody's been let go from our program, and we kind of take it personally. If somebody's not doing well, it's because we almost take it like it's our fault, because our job is to educate. So we take definitely an interest in people that maybe aren't hitting their cutoffs. Especially as an intern, I don't think there's anyone we'd say you're not going to a 2-year, because you haven't had the opportunity to really,
showcase, right.
So I'd say that as especially as a one, first of all, we're only seeing you for half the time anyway. And, it would have to be pretty horrible for us to say that, you're not going to make it. Like, and our big thing, honestly, is honesty. If something happens, if you do something wrong, just be honest about it. And,
Right.
lying is something that we have a hard time with, but, as long as you're honest with us, then we can get you through.
That's awesome, and that's so wonderful to hear. And that kind of goes back to the notion of this sort of the nurturing and the encouraging and the feedback and the communication we were talking about earlier. There's a question about, do you have any tips for do's and don'ts with regards to the interviews, especially as that comes
Yeah.
around the corner?
Well, I think we're all learning. So this is,
Yeah, right.
I think, I'm as interested in your feedback as you are in mine as far as do's and don'ts. But, some of the things that are obvious, I wouldn't have something really offensive in your background.
Right.
I think we would all say, dress the way you would as if you were going to be in an in-person interview. I wouldn't wear, a t-shirt. I don't care what you're wearing on the bottom, I guess, just as long as you look like you're wearing a, as long as I don't see it. But
business up top.
But I think that, it's just about presenting yourself. I can't say, again, maybe when we go through this, I'll find things that really didn't go over well, but, just trying to anticipate, since this is new for all of us, it's hard for me to say.
Right. And I think, and that's a tough thing. And I would say I echo the same sentiments, and just it's a real interview.
Yeah.
You need to think of it and treat it like that person's right next to you, right across from you, as opposed to across the desk, they're across a screen alternatively. Yeah. So kind of treat it with that sort of due diligence it requires. Do you think the class rank has any role, especially from the perspective of the MSPE?
The MSPE is so long. The thing that honestly that I find the most benefit from the MSPE is less the class rank, and more seeing how many people got honors. Because sometimes you look at, everyone from the school got honors, and then you look at their MSPE and you find out that 70% of people, and that's kind of unfair. Some schools only 10% get honors, and other schools 70% get honors. So that's, I use it for that. The quartile, I guess if you're in the very bottom quartile, that matters. But again, it's, I guess maybe this year may be different, because I always said it's more important how you did in ortho than it's how you did in medicine, I guess, to me. And plus, I think there's a lot of bias in a lot of that, and honors and all that anyway, as we're learning. Even AOA has a lot of bias when you get selected. So, I try not to put too much into that if everything else looks good.
Do you think on that note, do you think AOA is like, in your mind, is it a big deal? Like, do you guys tend to are more residents in your program non-AOA than there are?
I don't even, honestly,
AOA?
I don't know. I don't even know who got AOA.
Got it. Yeah. No,
we don't look at it, and maybe if we had, two candidates that we really liked and we couldn't decide, you'd say, okay, this one had AOA, this one didn't. This one was first quartile, this one didn't. And you kind of use it as a whole picture. But neither of those things, I think, in and of themselves are a game changer.
Yeah, it just goes to, I was in AOA when, matching to orthopedics, and
we didn't even have it.
Right. There you go. So it just goes to show you that this is all these different metrics we're talking about are just pieces of a much larger puzzle that obviously program directors like Dr. Geaney are sort of sifting through in a very time-consuming fashion. And so obviously it's not easy, because there's lots of great applicants out there. One last question about UConn that I had before we kind of wrap up is, how important is, I know Dr. Mazaka is, big sports legend, and sports medicine legend. How important is research? What kind of studies are encouraged, and how often or how early are the residents getting involved with it, if they are involved?
Yeah, so the nice thing, so the only requirements we have is that everyone has a paper that's publishable or submitted for publication by the time they graduate. There's a lot of opportunities. So we do have a research resident, So the way that works is that we ask you the day of interviews if you're interested in the research year. And if it's something you're interested in, we mark it down. And then when we match our 5, one of the people that said they were interested would do it. It's not, it's kind of within the same match. So we have, that year that's available. But, as far as, um, you know, your ability to do it, it's really up to you as far as how much you want to be involved. We have a lot of resources. Dr. Mazaka is kind of a machine when it comes to putting out research. So if you want to be involved, you certainly can. We have actually a really great department with our clinical outcomes. And we have one person who, I'm not kidding, loves IRBs. And she's amazing. She actually got an IRB pass with zero edits the other day for me. And yeah, right.
Impressive.
So great support the for the residents if they want to be involved, and so they have all the opportunities there. They have the IRB submission. They have the biomechanics lab that's always running. We have a cell biology kind of lab bench lab going too. So there's a lot of opportunity if you want it, but you don't have to do it unless you're interested, other than that one paper.
That's good.
Yeah, which is a struggle to get.
Yeah. Well, I'm impressed that they got an IRB without any edits. Like, I mean, literally, I just got something through that took 6 weeks worth of pushing.
I know.
Do you think there's any, if some of the projects are in, that are being submitted are in the sort of submission phase versus accepted, do you think is that still worth putting on there?
Yes,
and
as long as if it's being done. And again, for me, the importance of research is that you're able to do it. Is that you're able to balance it, that you're able to get it all done, that you're able to multitask. So whether or not it's accepted or submitted or in paper, doesn't matter. The last thing you want is a 0 under research on your ERAS, right? Because that's seen. You guys, I don't know if you guys have seen them, but pretty much there are tabs with each thing. There's board scores, there's, letters, there's all these things. And when you go to research, it puts a number next to it. And if the number is 0, and that includes, oral presentations, right? That includes everything. So you don't want a 0. So, I do whatever you can to get something on there.
Well, that's absolutely true, and something I would totally encourage people to listen to. And there is someone asked, is there any way to connect with Amir specifically?
He's one of our, he was like he is one of our foreign medical grads. He's one of our 3s now. He's wonderful.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you connect with Dr. Geaney, she may be able to introduce you to him. Yeah. So on that note, we're nearing an hour, and it's been absolutely wonderful having you on tonight, Lauren. And thank you again. Do you have any sort of parting words of wisdom for the applicants about UConn, about the application process, or anything else for that?
Yeah, I would just say, be honest, kind of reach out and reach out to the places you really have an interest in. You don't want to start sending emails to 60 of places, but places that you really think you have an interest, reach out. We want to hear from you because, we want people, again, that are really interested in us. So we like the dialogue. We like to share what we have. We're proud of what we have. So we really like to talk about it.
That's absolutely awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. Have fun this weekend. No problem at all. Everyone, this will be we will have the recording up in just the next couple of days. It'll be on the OrthoMentor YouTube channel. If you have any questions they want me to pass on to Dr. Geaney, by all means, please let me know. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to reach out as well. Have a good rest of the night and have a safe weekend. Stay safe this Labor Day weekend.
All right. Thank you.
All right. You too. Bye, Lauren. Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.